The Senate Banking Committee room went quiet as Senator Tim Scott leaned into the mic, his voice sharp and direct. "Representative Crockett, you talk about helping people. But aside from social media noise, what have you actually achieved?" It was a pointed jab, designed to catch the Texas Democrat off guard, especially with millions tuned in on C-SPAN. But what happened next took everyone by surprise. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She didn't lower her eyes. Instead, she smiled, a calm, confident smile that usually signals something big is coming. And Tim Scott had no idea she was fully prepared for this moment. Crockett had facts, documents, and a plan. What followed would leave the senator stunned and social media ablaze. This wasn't your average political spat. It was a moment that would shape both their careers and show the country exactly what happens when being ready meets the perfect chance. Before we dive into what made this moment so powerful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you never miss a moment like this. Trust us, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Here's how Jasmine Crockett completely flipped the script on Senator Tim Scott in a way that will be remembered for years. This moment would soon be counted among the most memorable confrontations in today's politics. Tim Scott, confident and collected behind his nameplate, had assumed he was facing an inexperienced newcomer from Texas. He was about to find out how wrong that assumption was. The contrast was stark. Tim Scott, a veteran Republican senator known for presenting himself as the balanced voice of conservative black leadership, now faced off with a passionate attorney-turned-progressive Congresswoman who had made a career fighting for justice. It wasn't just a battle of opinions. It was a clear clash between the very different political identities, establishment versus insurgent, traditionalist versus reformer, calculated diplomacy versus unfiltered advocacy. The hearing had followed the usual scheduled banking laws, regulatory talk, and general policy discussion. But for weeks, a slow tension had been building between Scott and Crockett, driven by contrasting views on how to address economic challenges in black communities. Scott, as the Senate's only black Republican, often clashed with progressives like Crockett, who called for structural change. The powder keg had been set to weeks earlier, when Crockett criticized Scott's record on CNN, highlighting his votes against legislation aimed at supporting black families. Scott's team pushed back hard with press statements and demands for corrections. Crockett didn't budge. She backed up every word with evidence. The buildup was real and both sides were ready. What made this confrontation so impactful was how unexpected it was. Crockett had been listening carefully when Scott suddenly turned his focus to her. With C-SPAN broadcasting live and the internet waiting for a spark, things quickly escalated. To fully grasp why this moment exploded, you have to understand who these two politicians are and what they symbolize. Tim Scott had strong standing in Republican circles. As the party's only black senator, he carried weight. A native of North Charleston, he had climbed the political ladder on a platform of conservatism and self-reliance. He'd served in Congress since 2013 and even had a brief 2020 presidential run. Scott's brand was that of the measured Republican voice who could address racial matters while still staying loyal to party principles. Too many conservatives, he was proof the GOP could be diverse and inclusive. Critics, however, argued that he often supported policies that harmed the communities he claimed to represent. They saw him more interested in gaining approval from white conservatives than championing black interests. By now, Scott had settled into his identity as the GOP's go-to-black spokesperson. Accustomed to deference from colleagues and media platforms, he rarely faced serious challenge, especially not from a first-term Democrat. That sense of security would be his undoing. Enter Jasmine Crockett. Everything about her made establishment figures uneasy. A former defense attorney from Dallas, she was elected to Congress in 2022, riding a wave of young progressives who didn't follow the old rules. At 42, she'd already built a reputation as sharp, outspoken, and media savvy. Crockett had a skill for breaking down complex policy in plain language. Her courtroom background gave her the tools to stay calm under pressure and dismantle weak arguments. Representing a largely black and Latino district, she campaigned on fighting for working families and sticking to her values, not meeting people halfway just to maintain civility. What gave her an edge was the way she combined legal experience, grassroots knowledge, and social media engagement. While many politicians felt disconnected from everyday struggles, Crockett had lived them. She grew up in South Dallas and understood firsthand what working families face. Her commitment to preparation was legendary. Her staff came to every meeting, adhering ready with research, facts, and policy angles. She knew that as a black woman in Congress, she'd be judged more harshly, and so she made sure she was always fully prepared. It wasn't just a habit, it was a necessity. This moment wasn't just the lawmakers having a disagreement. It symbolized a deeper divide in black political leadership. Tim Scott believed in working within the system and avoiding disruption. Crockett believed in calling out injustice and pushing for deep reform. This was about the strategies for achieving progress. As the committee hearing continued, the crowd of aides, press, and policy experts could sense something was coming. Social media was already buzzing from clips of earlier tense exchanges. Scott saw an opening to challenge the freshman Democrat, likely expecting an easy victory. With more experience and a senior title, he thought he had the upper hand. But for Crockett, this wasn't just politics, it was personal. She'd endured disrespect from older colleagues since she arrived in Congress, and she was done being underestimated. This moment had high stakes. Republicans hoped to appeal more to black voters, while Democrats aimed to energize their base. Strategists on both sides were watching. Scott had to prove he could still be the party's lead voice. On race, Crockett had to show she was more than just a viral moment. As the exchange began, Scott moved away from policy questions and looked directly at Crockett. "Representative Crockett," he said, "you talk a lot about helping people, but what real work have you actually done?" Other than social media posts, the tone was dismissive, and the room immediately took notice. Staffers stopped typing. Reporters perked up. The cameras caught it all. Scott leaned back, clearly thinking he'd scored a win. "I've been in Congress over 10 years. I've passed real laws. You post tweets and TikToks. Where's the depth?" His tone was patronizing, and it was a clear attempt to question her capabilities. But what Scott didn't realize was he had walked into a trap. He assumed Crockett's online presence meant she lacked real accomplishments, but her social media wasn't the work, it was a tool to amplify the work, and she was ready to prove it. Crockett calmly placed her pen down and looked straight at him, her face steady, but her body language sharp. The room was silent. Scott, sensing no immediate reply, kept going. "We're here to solve real problems, not chase likes. Your district needs solutions, not viral fame." That final jab crossed the line. It wasn't just policy, it was personal, accusing her of ignoring the needs of her community. The reaction was instant. Republican aides looked worried. Democratic aides looked tense. Twitter blew up as people began sharing the clip. Scott and Crockett were both trending, and pundits were scrambling to comment. Still, Crockett said nothing. Some thought she was caught off guard. Others, familiar with her approach, knew she was preparing her move. Then Scott tried to finish her off. "Look, I'm not trying to be harsh, but if you want to be respected here, focus on results. Maybe take notes from those of us who've been doing this longer." That was the moment everything shifted. While Scott talked, Crockett had been gathering her thoughts, pulling up notes, and preparing her rebuttal. The irony was sharp. Scott was accusing her of chasing online attention, while she was quietly getting ready to prove just how much she'd done. Then she spoke. Her voice was firm and calm. "Senator Scott, since you asked what I've done, let me explain what this so-called social media representative has actually accomplished. While you've been busy being the GOP's token black figure," gasps filled the room. Calling someone a token in a formal setting like Congress was nearly unheard of. But Crockett wasn't backing down. That word choice was deliberate. She was directly calling out the idea that Scott's race was used by his party for optics, not impact. Then she got to the specifics. "In my first year, I co-sponsored 47 bills focused on criminal justice, healthcare, and economic equality. That's more than you did in your first 3 years in office." Scott's smile disappeared. She pulled out her phone. "Last month, alone, my office helped over 800 constituents with everything from Social Security to immigration." "How many did you help, Senator? Do you even know?" Scott had no answer, and Crockett kept going. "Let's talk about my district. We've brought in $3.2 million for youth programs. Crime is down 15% in key neighborhoods thanks to new policing efforts. We expanded Pell Grants for students. That's what results look like." She was demolishing every claim Scott made, and then came the powerful shift. "You mock my social media, but that's how my constituents get information. A TikTok on financial aid gets more reach than a press release. When I pause about a town hall, people actually show up." The room was spellbound. "And you question my loyalty to my district," she continued. You've spent years supporting a party that harms people who look like us. Scott tried to interrupt, but Crockett shut it down. I'm not done. Then came the knockout blows. You voted against Medicaid expansion, against raising the minimum wage, against student debt relief, and you have the nerve to lecture me on helping black families? Scott was visibly shaken. I was a defense lawyer before this. I fought for people the system tried to ignore, while you voted for judges who made that system even harsher. Crockett finished with a line that hit hard. I've never forgotten who I fight for. I don't chase approval from people who disrespect me, and I don't betray my community for politics. Scott tried to respond, but he had no comeback. The committee chair called a recess, but the video was already everywhere. Social media exploded. Hashtag Crockettstrostic started trending within minutes. Thousands of people shared the clip, and influencers, journalists, and citizens all had something to say. AOC tweeted, "That's what it looks like when you actually do the work." It got hundreds of thousands of likes. The Shade Room and TikTok creators amplified the moment. Young black women, in particular, celebrated Crockett's response as a lesson in confidence. At facts, conservative circles mostly stayed quiet. A few complained about Crockett's tone, but had nothing to say about the substance. News networks covered it nonstop. CNN aired the full video. MSNBC praised it as a turning point. Even Fox News was forced to acknowledge it happened. Scott's team scrambled. They released a statement trying to soften the fallout. He went on Fox the next day, trying to paint Crockett as aggressive, but the damage was done. Even GOP strategists admitted privately that Scott had made a major misstep. Meanwhile, Crockett's stock rose instantly. Her office received thousands of supportive messages. Nancy Pelosi tweeted her admiration. Her moment raised over $500,000 for Democrats in 2 days. Crockett became a star. Speaking invites poured in. The party gave her high-profile roles. Political analysts saw the exchange as a clear sign. Young, diverse, well-prepared leaders were reshaping the Democratic future. The moment taught some key lessons. First, progressive Democrats weren't afraid anymore. They had the tools and the message. Second, black conservatives like Scott couldn't hide behind identity alone, especially when someone equally qualified called them out. Third, social media was now a strength, not a liability. Experts began studying the moment. It became a teaching tool in universities and political trainings. Crockett's strategy, her preparation, and her delivery became a model. Months later, it was still being talked about. Scott lost clout. Crockett gained power. But more importantly, the moment showed that politics is changing. The days of polite silence and seniority-based respect are over. As one strategist said, Jasmine Crockett didn't just win that moment. She showed us where politics is heading. Bold, informed, and unafraid. If you found this moment as powerful as we did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss moments like these, because in today's politics, being prepared beats being powerful every time.